Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner, the podcast that is more profitable than Concord. I'm Daniel Parker.
And I'm DB Fastbinder, and got a spooktacular All Hallows Eve special.
Indeed, yes. Well, if you are
Because I
returning,
had plans for
yes.
tomorrow night. Ooh.
Whereas I will just be sitting in a dark house so that I don't get kids ringing my doorbell wanting candy that I don't have. I know I'm a jerk.
Just go buy some of those sour apples, sour apple pops. Get a big bowl, put them at your front door, and say, "Don't knock and take one."
Yeah,
And then if somebody steals all of them, what do you care? You're at the same position as if 100 people got them.
right. Yeah. Well, I guess I should have thought of that. Well, uh,
Oh well.
well, if you are returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we usually do is we do a mixture of reviews, usually something new or recent, or something classic, and then we'll occasionally have some solo reviews to talk about. And we got a kind of an eclectic lineup, although we try to keep it in the spirit of the holiday. So.
Hmm.
But yeah, so normally we talk about box office, but just Venom did meh. It's about all we have to say about that.
Yep. Haven't seen Venom 2 yet. I do own it. I just keep putting it on or putting it off.
Yeah, yeah, and I haven't seen it at all, so I can't comment on it. But
Right. So like maybe what I heard Venom 2 wasn't especially great, so that might be reaping the whirlwind from that. Or, maybe superhero movies just aren't a thing anymore, and I should say aren't a thing unless they're pulling from nostalgia, and you can only tap that so many times.
right, yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what eventually happens with that. But why don't we get into our reviews?
Yes, on the opposite end of nostalgia, there's a movie that we picked out only because it came out this year.
Yes. And when we picked it out, we were unaware that it was actually a sequel.
The third in a trilogy, in fact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm,
uh, oh well. This is a good experiment because, in theory, a movie should be able to stand on its own. Like, I'm going to talk hypothetically here for a second. I think that if you just stumbled into The Empire Strikes Back, I think you could figure out what was going on if you had no other idea.
yeah, and you could probably do that with The Dark Knight.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
You might have some questions with when you got to the third movie in both of those trilogies, but
Yeah.
yeah, it, I guess I'm saying is that a good movie will be a good movie even if you haven't seen the previous ones.
Right. Yeah.
But so we watched Maxxine or Matriplexine. I'm assuming it's just Maxxine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is part of the series of X films by Ty West, which I had honestly never heard of before we picked this one out on HBO Max.
No, I had never heard of it either. Yeah. Um, yeah. It's definitely falls into that slasher category. Although they're definitely trying to do some social commentary here, especially since the movie takes place in 1985. So you have all the stuff going, all the different like controversial things that were happening at that time that certain people didn't really like very much. But
And what's amusing about that is that that actually would work both ways, no matter how you phrased it.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, now, so Maxine. stars Mia Goth. I haven't actually seen a picture of her outside of this movie. She has a very, if that isn't makeup, she has a very interesting freckle pattern on her face.
Yeah.
In fact, let's look this up. I'm curious now because Mia
Yeah.
Goth.
Yeah. I have a hard time believing that. Well, I mean, I guess it's possible that makeup artists would put freckle pattern on there like that, but I mean that's a lot of work.
Okay,
Yeah.
it
Oh,
no,
okay.
actually,
Well,
yeah.
they
I
did.
guess that I guess it's part of her makeup for her character.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Huh.
And now I'm wondering if we're looking like idiots to people who watched the previous movies. Like, no, you idiots! That mark on the side next to her right eye is a burn that she suffered from in the previous movie, not part of her freckles.
Like, oh, yeah.
But anyways, but enough about speculating about movies we haven't seen. This is basically
Yes.
operating as a first reaction, um, newbie reaction to this thing.
Yeah, yeah. So the plot of the movie, we have Maxine Minx, not her real name, of course.
Hmm.
Um, she is a spicy content actress, uh, and but she's trying to get into the mainstream,
Hmm.
which even today is virtually impossible. I mean, they're the only actress I can think of off the top of my head that was doing movies like that and actually got into what you would call mainstream would be Tracy Lords. She did a lot of spicy stuff in the '80s, and then uh, she then she was able to do like B movies with like I think she made some movies for Roger Corman.
Okay,
Um,
look, Roger
yeah.
Corman would hire her just because she was attractive and probably wouldn't ask for too much money.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I think part of the reason it's hard for them to get out of there is what gets you into there in the first place if your actual objective is being an actress. Like you're probably not going to see the next Sir Laurence Olivier getting spotted in a stag film.
No, no.
Although I say that, and then of course the immediate counterexample comes to mind of Stallone. So there you
Yeah,
go.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But, but yes,
um,
so she's getting into a horror movie, which is actually a logical progression. Like, um, what would a adult movie actress be able to get a role in?
yeah, it would be be a horror movie that's probably, because back then horror movies were kind of considered like exploitation. So, it would be
Right.
yeah, that'd be a nice little transition there. Yeah, and there's of course they show the scene where she's auditioning and does the line reading, and then right after that, and then the director's like, "Okay, take your top off so we can see your boobs." Like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, because horror movies in the '80s, you were probably going to see some of that.
Yes, yeah. Um, and
S-
yeah,
Yeah, and what's clear is that even for those of us who hadn't seen the previous movie, that she has a past that is catching up with her just as she's hitting her moment of triumph.
right, yeah, and and the bodies are starting to pile up.
Yep.
Yeah,
So, what I'm just going to say right off the bat is that let's go through like a strengths and weaknesses analysis here.
yeah,
So, strengths of the movie is it definitely makes you feel like you're seeing the era. Like, I feel like they probably researched it down to like when this movie takes place, down to the month, just to have like the exact right. Like, it's when St. Elmo's Fire came out, and you have an old recording of Casey Kasem saying that, and now the number one song in the country is St.
yeah.
Elmo's Fire.
Yeah, yeah, and of course it's the movie takes place in the backdrop of the Night Stalker, who was a serial killer in L.A. At the exact same time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was this the same? Wasn't that a real thing? I didn't even consider that because I
Oh
hadn't heard of
yeah,
Night Stalker.
oh yeah, yeah. There's actually a really good documentary on Netflix about it if
Okay.
anyone's curious. They and two of the people they talked to, the interview in it were the two detectives who were uh, trying to trying to catch him. But yeah, no, it's yeah, yeah, he was an evil man. He was an evil man. Um,
Okay. So,
and good to see you, Arcos.
okay, so this thing almost acts as like historical fiction in another way, even.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Like a movie that makes up an identity for Jack the Ripper.
right, yeah,
Okay, so those are strong points. I would say that Mia herself is perfectly fine in this one.
yeah,
Um, Perfectly fine to good. There's a couple of scenes where like she's very good at doing what she needs to do to sell the emotion in a scene.
oh
Um,
yeah, yeah,
she isn't necessarily being pushed too far by the script, but that's just like that sounds way meaner than I intended it to. No, she's good. She's good.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, the acting overall I thought was really good. I mean, you had you had Kevin Bacon playing a a scumbag private eye
From Louisiana.
from Louisiana. You had oh, I just lost his name.
Uh,
Uh,
well, Giancarlo Esposito was
yeah,
Maxine's agent.
right, Giancarlo Esposito. Yeah, he was good. Um, and the detectives I thought were pretty were really good. The guy detective was in Old Dads with Bill Burr.
Oh, yeah, he was the one dad who like actually had kids first, and like
No, no,
was
no.
being pushed around by his wife. Was that the one?
No, he was the one who he had a kid the same age as Bill Burr's, but he was the one who he was always trying to be really cool.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The one who was like trying to be like a Zoomer.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, the acting performances were good. I really liked. I do have a bit of a soft spot for whenever Hollywood becomes self-deprecating. You know, like this movie is it's self-deprecating towards Hollywood. Like they do poke fun at the industry. They poke fun at like just the or and make it very clear that the town can be really bad for a lot of people.
Yep, right. Because you're kind of seeing like the off. It's like the equivalent of off Broadway.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Now, as far as weaknesses go, I don't know if okay, this isn't necessarily a weakness. What I'll just say is that without the context of the previous movies, a lot of what Maxine did in the movie seemed maybe a little bit overkill.
Yeah.
So by which I mean, like, there's a scene where she is accosted by a guy with a switchblade, and she whips out a gun, and then um, is a bit brutal with him,
Yeah.
to put it mildly, in a non-spoilery way.
Yeah.
Now, now, this just being my first encounter with the character, I actually was wondering, okay, is she like actually the stealth villain of this thing?
Yeah. I wondered that too. Yeah. Or at the very least, like she's not a good person.
But so overall, she does mostly keep to. Okay, I always call this the Bugs Bunny rule because when Chuck Jones directed Bugs Bunny cartoons, his rule was that Bugs was never allowed to be the instigator of the problem. Like somebody had to push him, and then he would go all out against them.
Yeah.
I would say that whenever I think about like how much does it feel appropriate for a character to be getting revenge on another character, I always kind of use that proportionality test in my head. And this movie mostly follows it. Like, if a guy is accosting you in a back alley and traps you, and has a switchblade, and he's clearly going to try to have his way with you against your will. Pretty much whatever you do to him at that point is worth it, or is justified.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
No. Yeah. I didn't feel sorry for that guy. But
no, eh, but what I will say is that trying to avoid spoilers here.
yeah.
Is that in the end scene, I did without the context of the previous movie when her past comes a knocking. Um, I didn't necessarily think that it felt like something she did to the bad guy felt warranted.
Yeah, it seemed a little yeah, it seemed too over the top. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I believe the phrase is excessive force.
yes, there you go. Excessive force is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So I think that what I will say overall is that this is not my typical fare of movie.
Mhm.
Like I would actually call this like grindhouse ish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this could very easily have been one of those movies if it came out in the 70s or 8 it has a 70s exploitation feel to it. Now that I think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, sort of like Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave.
yeah,
Maybe not as extreme as those two, but you know, kind of in that same, you know, sandbox.
yeah.
Uh,
Now I feel like talking a little bit about spoilers. So if you very much want to see this movie after hearing us talk about its merits, which again, like if you like this type of thing, I know plenty of people who like gore for its own sake, who like
yeah.
extreme violence for its own sake, where I just kind of cringe when I don't feel like it's hits that proportionality. Um, you're probably gonna like this.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Um, now, it's available to stream right now for free on Max,
Yes.
which I will still sometimes call HBO Max because that rebranding was stupid because you took away your distinctive part of your name.
Yes.
But yeah, spoilers in
Yes.
one, two, three.
Mm.
All right. What I thought was really funny is that at a certain point I realized, oh, this is just a more serious version of the plot from Dragnet.
It is, yeah. Yeah, very similar, yeah, and, like, similar villains, similar, like yeah, like, messaging, yeah.
Right. Just that rather than one guy pretending to be a pagan, he was just a moral majority type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so this is another one where learning after the fact that this was a sequel suddenly made the lack of setup for the villain make sense because, well, of course you know her dad, the Southern preacher hypocrite guy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, why he's been the villain in at least one other movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
like Pamela Voorhees in the first Friday the 13th, you know?
right, exactly. So, of course you know who he is. Of course you're invested. Of course, anything that Maxine does to him feels completely justified.
Yeah.
Um, without that context, what it felt like was you had an opening act that was very strong in setting the scene and introducing you to Maxine's character. You had a middle of the movie where you were dealing with the father's minion, Kevin Bacon's Louisiana detective.
Mhm.
And then the Louisiana detective gets offed in such a needlessly brutal way, and in a way where I was thinking to myself, wait, he had information that would probably help you defend yourself against whatever comes next.
Yeah. Like, yeah, yeah, that's a trend I've been seeing in movies a lot lately, where you have a character like that, like you know, like, "Whoa, I can help you out. I know things," and then the main character's like, "I don't care. You're dead."
Yeah, yeah. Like so, they basically they catch him, and then they wake him up, or they wait for him to wake up in the car, and then they crush that car in a car compactor,
Yeah,
and then they have a couple of dogs come over to lick up the blood to clean things up. I'm just thinking to myself, well, first off, that's just like again, there's that law of proportionality, right?
yeah,
Like, had he successfully killed anybody? No. Had he gone after her? Yes. It's like she very much didn't want to deal with the police when really it's like turn him into the police.
yeah. Well, yeah, she clearly didn't want to talk to the police because every time they tried to talk to her, she's telling them to f off. Yeah,
Right. Or like at the end of the movie where she is standing over her father as the after a couple of police people have died, and there's a police helicopter over her telling her to lower her weapon, and she still uses this like sawed-off shotgun to blow up her dad's head in front of them,
yeah.
and nothing bad happens to her because of this.
Well, well, it was L.A. in the '80s. When you take out a guy like that, they're probably aren't going to really care that much. It's probably going to be hard pressed to find a jury that would convict her for killing her religiously fanatical father.
Uh, I mean, I wasn't even thinking that far. I was just thinking like, oh, says the person in the police helicopter who might have like a rifle or something, armed person just killed somebody else who we don't know who they are. Better
Oh
put
yeah.
her down.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, yeah,
Um, and I kind of felt like the movie was maybe it's like again a criticism I had while I was watching was okay, yes, Southern religious type, clear and obvious, immediate villain. Haven't seen this a billion times before, but I'm going to assume that based on like little flashbacks you get from the previous movie, that whatever happened to him was deserved.
yeah, yeah.
I'll also say that it made it make sense why they didn't explain more about her backstory and just kind of hinted at it the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can't ding the movie uh, for penalizing us for coming late to the show.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It definitely assumes that you saw the other movies.
Yeah, I don't know if this one requires both movies to see or if it's just Pearl.
Yeah.
I think this is a direct sequel to Pearl.
Okay.
Um, I'll say that overall, I'm not necessarily rushing out to fill in my gaps in the Maxxine lore,
Yeah, I'm really not either.
but it was perfectly serviceable. And again, if you're in the target audience for it, I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I mean, horror movie fans are a very accepting lot. Um, in that they'll give you a chance, like no matter what you make. And yeah, like I would imagine there is a good subset of horror movie fans that are that like these movies. Yeah.
Yep. All right. That's all I personally have to say. Daniel, do you have any closing thoughts?
Uh, no, I think I've said all I need to say on this.
Cool, because we're about to switch over to your personal review.
Yes, yes. The original Ring. Um,
Uh, I do like how my image search keeps coming up with international movie posters because Maxine was in German,
yeah.
Hollywood ist ein Killer.
Yes.
And then we got the Spanish version of the original Japanese Ring,
Yeah.
El Círculo.
Yes. Yeah. This is a movie I've been meaning to watch for a while. Full disclosure, by the way, I have not seen the American version, so I can't comment on it. Um, that one was with Naomi Watts, and it was directed by Gore Verbinski, who did three of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Um,
That's an interesting switch. Although, okay,
yeah,
I guess as far as like the mainstream franchises go, Pirates is the most horror adjacent. What with the
yeah,
whole Black Pearl zombies and all.
oh yeah, yeah. But this movie is, came out in 1998, and it's about a reporter named Raiko, and she's looking into the death of her niece, who died unexpectedly and suddenly, and she begins hearing rumors and everything floating around about a tape, a cursed tape that if you watch it, you'll get a phone call, and then it'll say that you've got 7 days to live, and then after the 7 days you just die. And kind of a very like their faces have this like look on their like terror, like they're scared to death. And so Raiko is she's trying to figure out what happened, and she ends up going to the Izu Peninsula, where the kids were staying at this cabin. She's in the cabin, and then she finds the tape at the lodge's front desk, and of course she watches it, and she gets the phone call, and she's got 7 days, and um, so then she calls in her ex-husband, uh, Ryuji, I think is his name, if I can believe that's it. He's played by God. Why didn't IMDb put these uh, in order here? He was played by the guy, Ryuji. He's played by Hiroyuki Sanada, and he's very well known for American audiences. He's been in like a bunch of movies over the last few years. Most recently, he was in Bullet Train.
Mhm.
He's the old man in Bullet Train. He's the
Okay.
he's just a little story. Um, um, and the thing with Ryuji is that he's a psychic. He has a clairvoyant ability, and so the of course the other part of it too is they have a son named Yoichi, and Yoichi is he has this. It turns out he has the same ability as his father, and basically the rest of the movie is just them investigating the tape and trying to figure out the mystery of like the girl in the well and everything. It feels less of a horror movie and more of like a procedural drama. Um,
It's almost our theme tonight, where the previous movie was less of a horror movie than a grindhouse movie. The
yeah,
This one is like, it's a police procedural that has some horrific elements.
yeah, yeah. And then we'll get to our classic movie in a bit,
Yep.
but yeah, so they're trying to figure out, and they're also trying to figure out how to break the curse, and the twist in the movie is like really like when they you know they think they break the curse for everybody, but it was really just for I don't know if I should give away a spoiler, but
I'd say, is your objective here to recommend it to people to go watch it, or do you want to do a deeper dive on it?
no, I definitely want people to watch it, so I'll avoid spoilers. But yeah, it is it's a really good story. And I will say as far as the horror elements of it, it isn't nearly as gruesome as Audition, which I did 2 weeks ago. Um, and but it's the I mean the image of the girl with her nails pulled out was really gnarly.
If
That was probably the worst part for me. And of course, although I will say most people, if they haven't seen this movie or they haven't seen the American version, they've seen it being parodied. Like
Yes.
it's been parodied in a lot of anime, in a lot of other like spoof movies.
There's a manga where the entire concept is that the girl looks so much like Sadako that her classmates are scared of her,
Yeah,
and so she finally makes a friend.
yeah. And there's in My Dress Up Darling, there's actually a TV show that Gojo and Marion watch, and it's not only do they spoof this, but they also spoof the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with it. um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it. Now, again, I haven't seen the American version, so I can't I can't make a comparison between the two. Um, Although from what I've heard from some people is that this is the better version.
It
Um,
would be extremely shocking if the American version of a Japanese horror movie turned out to be better.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, give it a watch. It's on Shutter right now. It might be on other streaming platforms. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would call it scary, but it's definitely a good movie to watch and very really great story. Yeah.
You know, that might explain why it's had such an enduring appeal, because you have the scary image of Sadako climbing out the television, right?
Right.
But you also have a story that somebody who isn't out for just endless horror and gore could enjoy too.
Right. Yeah.
It
Indeed.
all seems to be about percentages.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of percentages, I'm going to guess that 100% of people have at least heard of Psycho.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Hey, 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 hey. Yeah. So this movie is one that needs very little introduction, but we're going to give one anyway. Last week we had watched Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and we decided to give this one a go. His I don't know if it was his immediate previous movie, but it is the one of his horror movies that he's really the best known for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this was 3 years before The Birds.
Right. Although funny enough, I didn't realize that the cover for Psycho would also have a whole bunch of birds on it.
Yeah, yeah, that's because Norman's a bit
Oh,
of a
that's right.
taxidermist. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
he likes stuffing birds, and he had
Yeah.
a bunch of yeah.
All right. So if for some reason, actually, you know what? There's actually a very decent chance that people in the audience basically know the broad strokes of what Psycho is without ever having actually seen it. Um,
Yeah,
you showed me a clip from Rocco's Modern Life earlier today. So many Simpsons references to various scenes in Psycho.
yes. South Park has even referenced it more than once. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
uh,
just and like so many comedy shows with it he
yeah,
in a
yeah,
dark scene like that.
yeah, yeah,
So it's one of those things where actually watching it is almost it feels very familiar right away.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Um, Now, I had seen this once in a high school English class. It was that stage of the year where it's like, okay, well, we're about to go on break, so if we're going to watch a movie, let's watch something with some cultural relevance.
yeah, yeah. And I had actually never seen it before. At least not all the way through. I'd only seen like clips from it out of context, including the shower scene.
Yep. Um, s- so right away, watching this back to back with the birds. So did you see Hitchcock doing his traditional cameo in this one? I must have missed it.
It's when Janet Leigh, when she goes back to work, he's
Hmm.
outside the window.
Okay. See, I missed it this time. Um, but he waited a little bit longer than the very first scene this go around, unlike in the birds.
Yeah, yeah, the birds where he's just like, yeah, first scene of the movie, he's walking right out with a pair of dogs.
Yep. Yep. Um, so much like the birds, this one stars a blonde woman with shortish hair and a somewhat curvy figure. It's like, okay, Hitchcock, I salute your type, I guess, but
Yeah,
it's kind of funny how predictable he was
yeah,
with his casting.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so if with the birds where I said that the movie starts 40 or the horror starts 45 minutes in, really this one is kind of similar where it doesn't necessarily have what I think of as the feel of a horror movie early on. It feels more like a romantic drama already in progress.
yeah. Yeah, and with a little bit of what do we call it? Getaway movie, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So the movie starts off where we meet yeah, not Janet. Yeah, Janet
Mer-
Lee. Sorry. Um, Janet Lee playing Marion Crane, and she's in a hotel room with her boyfriend Sam Loomis. You pointed this out when you watched it. Very risque scene for 1960.
Right, they were talking about how he had gotten divorced, how his wife was, draining him for alimony,
Yeah,
how he couldn't go away with her even though she desperately wanted to. How this, oh, we can't go back to my place because my mother's photo is there, my sister lives there. Well, send your sister out for the night and turn your mother's photo around.
yeah, yeah, and so then she goes back to work, and her boss, who's like a realtor, land developer guy, um, has a new client who's just bought a house for his daughter. It was a wedding present, and hands over $40,000 in cash, which back then, I actually did an inflation calculation, was in today's money is over $400,000.
Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
But and so what I'll say about this movie that's really good is that, for at least in the opening half, it is very willing to let you draw inferences.
hmm
There's never a scene where she thinks to herself, "I need to steal that money so that I can get away from all of this trouble I have." You
yeah,
just have a scene of her looking very carefully at the money, and then you smash cut to her packing.
yeah. Yeah, like it's pretty easy to figure out, like, okay, yeah, she's running away with the money.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so but of course, on her way out of she's in Phoenix, and on her way out of town, though, she does see her boss walking across the street, and they make eye contact, and he's like, "Yeah, I know what you did." Yeah, and so then she's trying to get to California to meet up with Sam. But a lot of stuff happens along the way, like a policeman's following her, and so she has to get a new car.
right. She
Uh,
keeps acting guilty in ways like that really are going to draw more attention than anything else.
yeah, yeah, and then she's driving along at night, and then it starts raining, and then she somehow ends up off the main highway, and ends up at the Bates Motel.
Yes. So she runs into Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, and the dude was basically made for the role of this neurotic weirdo
Yeah,
who seems like he means well.
yeah, yeah. And he seems very, like, just kind of like closed off, very, slightly awkward, but just trying to be as friendly as possible. But then as he starts interacting with Janet Lee more, you begin to realize that, okay, yeah, this guy's off his rocker.
Yeah. Whew.
Mhm.
And you very quickly realize that he has actually, what really strikes me is that he is basically what some people would, some awkward people you run into online would be if they didn't have the internet to blow off steam
Yeah,
or
yeah,
radicalize them one way or the other.
that's true. Yeah.
In another world, he could have been talking about how Bernie could still be president, guys.
Yeah.
Or a QAnoner. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Listen in to Alex Jones.
yes, exactly. Well, whichever side you want to make fun of.
Right, yeah,
Uh, so yeah, he has a very interesting relationship with his mother. One thing that seemed a little bit weird to me is that she could hear them perfectly from the main house or the main hotel when they were
yeah,
shouting up at their living house through the pouring rain.
yeah, Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, that's nitpickery.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
Yeah, yeah. So then we kind of cut to the infamous shower scene where because it's and again I'm not going to worry about spoilers. It's Norman dressed up like his mother, and he stabs her to death. Um, and Probably the only reason this movie was done in black and white was because of the blood. They used chocolate syrup for the blood, and it wouldn't have looked like wouldn't have looked right if it was in color.
right, it was an intentional design choice because the black and white just like it highlights lights and darks.
Yeah,
Yeah, in a way that again, 1960, it was an odd choice for a movie, but it wasn't necessarily the worst choice.
right. Yeah, yeah, and I would give another example of that would be the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which I think came out just a couple of years before this movie. And that movie was in black and white because the characters that John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart play in that movie are supposed to be in their mid 20s.
Oh,
And John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart were not in their mid 20s when they made that movie.
oh, 1962.
Oh, okay. So it was after. All right.
Yeah, so even a more interesting choice.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, then the movie then the movie pivots the point of view to the sister, who's played by Vera Miles, I believe was the actress's name.
Yep.
Yeah. And she meets up with Sam, and they're trying to figure out what happened to Janet Lee, and then that's when they come across the base motel, and you know lots of more bodies start piling up, and that's when we find out just how deranged Norman really is.
Yes, he has so basically what happened was his mother had kept him under her thumb for his whole life, and like I guess he felt isolated and alone, like he could never leave her. And then she started a relationship with a man, and Norman snapped, killed her, taxidermied her body, and then like she developed in his head as a personality
Yes.
because
Yeah.
like he couldn't imagine life without her, so he invented her reactions.
Yeah, and there's a scene at the end of the movie where we have this psychiatrist character who uh, basically gives a bunch of expository dialogue about explaining his psychosis and explaining how he has this split personality between him and his mother, and that the reason, like, because you find out that there were other young ladies that he had killed, and it's because whenever he develops an attraction for another woman, that's when the mother side of his persona kicks in, and then he kills them, and because he feels this guilt, and but then by the end of the movie, though, the his mother persona has completely taken him over.
Yeah. Now the scene of that exposition, watching it the second time, it was much more obvious than the first time it was tacked on because the studios made Hitchcock include that because they're worried that the dumb audience wouldn't be able to understand what had happened.
Yeah, and Hitchcock's like, well, isn't it obvious what's going on?
Right, especially with the end scene with like the I wouldn't even hurt a fly
Yeah,
scene,
yeah.
where it's Norman thinking in his mother's voice.
Yes.
In that scene, like you could tell that it was made in protest. Like it was in a small, cheap set. It was the dialogue wasn't interesting. It was just like now, mind you, it was a fine enough performance from the psychologist character himself,
Yeah.
but uh, it was like Man, you could kind of tell this was under protest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's just like, okay, fine, I'll put it in here, but I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to do it very well.
If it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing right.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so strengths and weaknesses. So this one has an iconic soundtrack.
Mhm.
Um, one thing that actually kind of surprised me. So it's not just the dee 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 during the shower scene, but there's another theme that they start the movie with that sets the mood very well.
Yeah.
Um, what kind of kept surprising me was how often it was being used in scenes that were like tense, but didn't feel like the type of tense that the song was promising,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
her driving along.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was kind of meant to be like, oh, it's give that sense of, well, it doesn't seem like there's something, bad happening, but something bad is going to happen, and you need to be ready for it.
Right.
Uh,
I just would like I think they maybe could have done a different theme for some of those driving scenes, and it might
yeah.
have that could have fit the like it felt like it was at a 9 when it needed to be at like a 5 for that stage of the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
That
Yeah.
was just a personal thought as I was watching it again.
Yeah. Yeah. The score was done by Bernard Herrmann, who he'd done other he worked with Hitchcock before in other movies. He also did Citizen Kane.
Hmm.
And he from what I've heard, at least from according to William Friedkin, he was not a nice man.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, because Friedkin wanted to hire him to do the score for The Exorcist, and when he met with him, he was just a total jerk. Like, it just like, oh, okay,
Cost him that job.
yeah, yeah. And the opening score, the one that you mentioned, was actually kind of like loosely parodied in as the opening score for Reanimator. Like that,
Ah,
yeah. Like if you listen to the two songs right next to each other, they sound almost identical.
okay, that's funny. Um, now, watching it a second time, it is kind of funny how many like oblique references to the split personality there are in Norman Bates's dialogue.
Yeah,
Like I can't recall the specific wordings, but it's like okay, yeah,
yeah.
this is just
Well, like the tagline of the poster: a best friend is his mother."
yep.
Yeah,
Well, I just mean like him saying like I don't know like this isn't an actual bit of dialogue, but it's something along the lines of I have half a mind to something something something.
oh yeah,
Where it's like I feel like I'm of two minds of this one. Right? Like, yeah, again, I can't remember the exact line, but it was some sort of oblique reference like that.
yeah, yeah,
It's like, oh, mother is difficult, like oblique references to the fact that his mother is dead, just things like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So watching it a second time many years later, it's like, okay, I can see where you were going with this now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is definitely one of those movies that on repeat viewing, you do catch things that you missed the first time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, Daniel, I have some thoughts on the pacing of the movie. How did it hold your attention?
I held my attention. Yeah. Uh,
What
Yeah,
else?
no, I didn't get like bored with it or anything like that.
I personally think that it could have been tightened up slightly.
Mhm.
Um, but I also would not be sure what to recommend tightening up. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so me coming in, having seen it before, knowing the ending, it did kind of feel like a joke where I already knew the punchline at
Mm,
times. So that kind of made me go, okay.
yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it's like watching The Sixth Sense, after, knowing that Bruce Willis is dead the whole time. Yeah.
yep, exactly. Oh, Daniel, that 20-year-old spoilers that were relentlessly mocked in pop culture ever since. Come on, man.
Oh, darn, darn. Yeah, I know. I know.
Um, so I don't think I liked watching this one quite as much as watching the birds, and I feel like the birds would hold up better for me on a second viewing, just because. And this isn't like okay, losing your POV character partway through, it kind of felt like we went from, okay, we're on the journey with this character, and we know what's going on, and oh, now we have this, oh, the sister who we've never seen before. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can kind of understand that. Although I will say, like, you talk about something that's been copied a lot is that storytelling method of, watching a movie where you think you're watching it with the main character,
Yep.
and then they die and you're like, what the heck? And then you're with another different character. Yeah.
Right. It's just that usually with that type of thing, I shouldn't say usually. You'll often have had like more scenes with the new character. So,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
again,
yeah,
it was shocking. It was horrific.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, I mean, that was
That's,
Hitchcock was a master of that.
yep.
Yeah.
But I'll say it was like if I compare it to The Birds, which we watched last week, that had a consistent cast of characters throughout, and I felt like they also we talked earlier about what's Hitchcock's type, attractive blondes with shortish hair. What was Hitchcock's mother like? I wonder if Hitchcock thought his own mother was slightly overbearing and controlling because it seems to keep coming up.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know enough about his early life to comment on it, but yeah, that could be the case. Yeah.
It just seems plausible given that it keeps being a motif in his stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, see, it sounds like you preferred the birds over this one.
Yep.
I, I probably like this one better.
And I can I can totally see that.
Yeah.
That's uh, so what did you like about it? Well, outside of
Um.
what you've already talked about, I mean, but
Well.
like what
Well.
pushes it over the edge for you?
Well. I honestly, I think it's Norman. Just the character himself. He's just it's a very, he's a very he's a complex, but I mean he's one of those characters that's just like you have this morbid fascination with him. Like you can kind of see like how he could become what he became, and
Hmm.
just the like having having the overbearing mother, and then then just one day snapping, and then and then having that that guilt of like, oh, this was like the one person in the world that that I loved, and that loved me, and now I got rid of her, and then he just
Cuckoo,
yeah,
cuckoo,
cuckoo,
cuckoo.
yeah,
Um, yeah. The other thing I'll say about it is that I mean, I already praised Anthony Perkins a minute ago, but
yeah,
like like even knowing that he was the one who did it, the way he was able to give his character a lot of like horrified, um, not terror, like just the sense of dread at what he thought his mother had done.
yeah, yeah,
Like he still felt like he was just guilty about what had happened.
yeah,
Um, but like guilty as if somebody else had done it. And now, oh, I have to cover up for mother again.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, and of course the fact that the money that Janet Leigh stole, she wrapped it up in a newspaper,
Yep.
and he had no idea that that money was there, and he still took it, and he just tossed it away with her and
Threw it in the bog.
threw it in the bog. Yeah, and I and obviously he, he didn't think twice to look in it, and money obviously didn't mean anything to him.
Yep. Uh, Also, you can kind of see why. Now I think you've told the story before where Anthony Perkins' career was kind of destroyed by this movie because nobody could see him as anything but Norman Bates after this,
Yeah, yeah, and that's partially, I think that's probably the big reason why they did the sequels.
right? Because you can see why somebody would want to come back to see that character, but I can't imagine that character being good a second time.
Yeah, although I've heard good things about uh, Psycho 2 and 3,
Hmm.
um, and especially Psycho 2. So
Uh,
I mean, you know,
the other thing that's
I,
kind of interesting is that I feel like in the 60s and 70s, you were much more punished for being associated with a major character.
mm,
Like, see Adam West as Batman,
yeah, or William Shatner as Kirk, or Leonard
or
Nimoy as Spock. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So who knows? Maybe if he came out with this today, he would have been able to parlay that into more varied roles afterwards.
yeah, yeah, or at the very least, gotten on a Netflix show or something.
Yep, yep. But yeah, no, like so this one it's a classic for a reason. Definitely worth your time. Um, if you somehow didn't know the punchline of this movie, man, you need to watch more Simpsons, I guess,
Yeah.
because they loved to always like play around with this with Principal Skinner and his mother.
Oh yeah. What? No, mother, I can't do that.
Oh, there was the middle of the school day,
Yeah. Uh,
but it's a recommend. Like I said, I didn't like it quite as much the second time around as the first, but that's just a matter of taste.
yes. Yeah. And it's on Netflix right now.
So statistically, if you're at all interested in movies, you probably have a Netflix subscription. So why not?
Indeed. Yes. Well, I think we've said all we need to say for tonight.
Indeed.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in on this special episode. Give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell. Happy Halloween, um,
Mhm.
and we'll see you next week. Night, everybody.
Yes. In the spooky days of post-election,
Ooh, yes. See
a
you
real
guys.
horrific holiday.
Yeah, yeah. All right, later.
Good night, everyone.